you are. Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for the 21st day in the 6th month in the 16th year of Chungi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Cherokee Gyeongjimun. I was trying to adjust the brightness on my lamp here. And there we go. Okay, that's good. And let's see, let's go take a tour around the kingdom to see what's going on. And right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee is 69 degrees, mostly cloudy, getting up to 90 degrees today. Partly sunny and humid, a thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. Tonight, getting down to 68, a thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise partly cloudy and humid. Father's hometown, Jeongju, North Pyongan province in Korea. Currently 81, mostly cloudy, and getting down to 71 tonight. Cloudy and 71 tonight, and then tomorrow, high of 79, morning thunderstorm in the area, otherwise cloudy, so much cooler than it has been. And then at the Cheonggyeong Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, they have a special weather statement. It's probably fog, right? I don't know. Check it out yourself. And it's 71 and mostly cloudy right now. Today, high of 89, partly sunny and humid, a thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. A hazy sky due to high altitude smoke from distant fires. Guess Canada is burning, huh? Okay, and then tonight, partly cloudy and humid, low of 67. Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, currently 73, mostly cloudy, getting up to 93 today, humid with sunshine, few clouds tonight, low of 74, clear to partly cloudy and humid. And the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 79, mostly sunny, low of 72 tonight, clouds with a shower in spots late, and then tomorrow cloudy and a couple of soaking showers in the afternoon, high of 83. The Gunma Palace is in Japan, currently 79, partly cloudy. 75 for a low tonight, very humid with periods of rain. Tomorrow, rather cloudy and uncomfortably humid. Periods of rain in the afternoon, high of 87. Ilan in Taiwan. And Taiwan, we're looking at 87 degrees right now, overcast. Tonight, getting down to 78, a stray evening shower, otherwise mainly clear. 94 for a high tomorrow. So Ilan takes the prize today. Okay. All right, so let's go to Father's Word. Here. I'm in the book on the root of the universe, Wujue Kunbon. Oh, look, Father's talking about disco dancing. Okay, this is in the 90s, all right. Okay. So basically, Father's talking about be in the world, but not of the world, all right? This is what the Bible says. And he starts out with disco dancing and some sort of liquor or alcohol parties and cigarettes, all that has no relationship. Free sex, no relationship. Homosexuality, lesbianism, and people who want to remain unmarried, no need for them. No matter what winds blow, you must always be bold and maintain your position. 스스로 자리를 지켜나가는 것입니다. Okay. Even if the wind blows, even if the hurricane comes, or Father says typhoon, even if a typhoon comes, and no matter how much the earth may move, the earth, Chigusong, the planet Earth, no matter how much the planet Earth may move, north, south, east, and west will never change. And in the same way, the direction in which the Unification Church goes will also never change. Bam! And so if we just make unification here, that will be the end of it. Yes. Praise God. So the direction of the Unification Church will never change. even no matter what winds may blow, even if a typhoon comes, even if the planet Earth may move north, south, east, and west will not change. And in the same way, the direction of the Unification Church, the direction in which the Unification Church is going, will not change. My goodness, yes, praise God, will not change. That's right. That's right. It will not change. The direction of the Unification Church will not change. So the corollary, of course, then would be that if someone does change, then they are no longer Unification Church. That would be the logical corollary, right? If the Unification Church is always going the same direction, but someone says, oh, let's go in this direction. Okay, well, all right, fine, that's your choice, but you are no longer Unification Church. That is a fantastic quotation I'm going to have to use at some point. Okay. Oh, my goodness, yes. Praise God. Now, all right, let's go. Let's go and see what is happening in the world. The changing world, okay? The changing world. All right, so let's see what President Trump is saying right now with regard to Ukraine, and because he's changed, he's changed, he changed, didn't he? But his overall direction is peace. So in that sense, he did not change, but his tactics have changed. So it's a tactical change rather than a strategic change, I guess you could say. And he's been talking to Putin and trying to get Putin to come to the table. And he thought he was making progress, but now after almost 6 months since he was inaugurated, President Trump has decided that it's time to go in a different direction in order to achieve the original purpose. So he hasn't changed his original purpose. So anyway, he spoke with the BBC, and so let's check that out. Donald Trump has said he is disappointed but not done with Vladimir Putin in an exclusive phone call with the BBC. The US president was pressed on whether he trusts the Russian leader and replied, I trust almost nobody. Trump was speaking hours after he announced plans to send weapons to Ukraine and warned of severe tariffs on Russia if there was no ceasefire deal in 50 days. In an interview from the Oval Office, the president also endorsed NATO, having once described it as obsolete, and affirmed his support for the organization's common defense principle. Yeah, so now President Trump has given Russia sort of a 50-day deadline, and we'll have to see what happens if Putin is going to test him on that, obviously. So I think President Trump needs to be ready to follow through with his threat. It is a threat. Anytime you give a deadline, it's a threat. It's always you do this by this time or else in school, or else you fail, or else I'll knock your grade down one letter point or something, one letter or something like that. So President Trump needs to be ready to follow through on his threat in 50 days, which would be what? 45 days to the end of September, August, I guess. So it'll be beginning of September. Yeah. We'll see what happens then. That'll be around the time of Father's Songhua anniversary. I don't have the exact date on me right now, but it'll be around that time. In an interview from the Oval Office, the president also endorsed NATO. Okay, we did that, right? The president made the phone call, which lasted 20 minutes, to the BBC after conversations about a potential interview to mark 1 year on since the attempt on his life at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Asked about whether surviving the assassination attempt had changed him, Trump, all right, well, we've already done that. Okay, Having just met with NATO chief Mark Rutte at the White House, however, the president spent a significant portion of the interview expanding on his disappointment with the Russian leader. Trump said that he had thought a deal to end the war in Ukraine was on the cards with Russia 4 different times. So he tried his best. When asked by the BBC if he was done with Putin, the president replied, "I'm disappointed in him, but I'm not done with him. But I am disappointed in him." Pressed on how Trump would get Putin to stop the bloodshed, the US president said, "We're working on it, Gary. We'll have a great conversation. I'll say, that's good. I think we're close to getting it done, and then he'll knock down a building in Kiev." Russia, I guess he's talking about his experiences until now. Russia has intensified its drone and missile attacks on the Ukrainian cities in recent weeks, causing record civilian casualties. It launched a full-scale invasion of its neighbor in 2022. Putin has insisted he also wants peace, but has said what he calls the root causes of the war must be resolved first. He argues that the war is the result of external threats to Russia's security from Kiev, NATO, and the collective West. Conversation moved on to NATO, which Trump has previously criticized as obsolete. He said he did not think that was still the case, as NATO is now becoming the opposite of that because the alliance was paying their own bills. Trump said it was amazing that NATO leaders had agreed to ramp up defense spending to 5% of their economic output, in other words, of their GDP. Nobody thought that was possible. He said he still believed in collective defense because it meant smaller countries could defend themselves against larger ones. Trump said that the leaders of countries, including Germany, France, and Spain, had come to respect him and his decision-making, partly because world leaders believed that there was a lot of talent in being elected to the presidency twice. When asked whether world leaders were at times obvious in their flattery, Trump replied that he felt they were just trying to be nice. All right, let's let that pass. Okay. President Trump. Come on, Tim. President Trump was also asked about the UK's Trump. Okay, about the UK's future in the world, and said he thought it was a great place. You know, I own property there. Asked if he thought the UK had made the most of Brexit, he said no, adding, "I think it's been on the sloppy side, but I think it's getting straightened out." Okay, Keir Starmer, we don't care about that. Well, okay, well, maybe some people do. The president also said of Sir Keir Starmer, "I really like that." This is BBC. "I really like the Prime Minister a lot, even though he is a liberal," and praised the UK-US trade deal. He said he had a special bond with the UK, and that was why he had made a deal with the country. For the most part, in terms of your competitors and in terms of the European Union, I haven't made a deal. You know, we have to be careful about throwing around words like liberal, because liberal in the UK is quite different from liberal in the US or elsewhere. And of course, liberal in the US has come to mean, well, I guess, you know, you have your Bill Maher liberals, you have your, what's his name, the senator from Pennsylvania, liberal, but then you have AOC, AOC liberal. So I don't even know what the word liberal means anymore. I think it's probably, they don't even call themselves that now, right? AOC doesn't call herself liberal, she calls herself progressive. And this new guy who's trying to become a mayor of New York, he calls himself a social democrat, as AOC does, by the way. You know, he's obviously a communist. He's a Marxist-Leninist in terms of his proposals. So these labels mean different things in different countries and also mean different things in different times. You know, Kennedy was a liberal, you know, but not today. He would, if he were alive today, he would run screaming from the Democratic Party to join the Republicans. Anyway, so liberal. He says he's a liberal. Okay, well, I guess he spoke about how he was looking forward to an unprecedented second state visit to the UK in September this year. On what he wanted to achieve during the visit, Trump said have a good time and respect King Charles because he's a great gentleman. Okay. Someone get him off the phone, please. Come on. All right, so let's see here. Yeah. All right, Canada. You mentioned Canada a bit. All right, all right. Well, that's okay. All right, well, that's enough. That's enough. I'm only interested in what he said about the Putin. Quite frankly, the rest of the stuff is kind of filler. Anyway, I think. All right, so President Trump, trying to give Putin motivation to come to the peace table. And he has threatened to bomb Moscow and maybe bomb Beijing. And it may come to that. It may come to that. It may come to, dropping some bombs, on, I hope not civilian areas, but maybe on some military installations in or near the Moscow area. It may come to that. And we may get very, very close to World War III before Putin decides to de-escalate. And that's the problem with the strategy that President Trump is now pursuing, which is to escalate for the purpose of de-escalating. And that's fine if the result is de-escalation. Remember when the U.S. went into Iraq, the original idea was shock and awe, right? Shock and awe. In other words, to just go in with overwhelming force and then bomb them to smithereens, and then hopefully they will surrender. I remember the first night of that bombing, and Saddam Hussein was in a bunker, and the U.S. targeted the bunker with a bunker busting bomb, and that was one of the first sort of missions I think that was flown in the bombing campaign. And the idea was to take Saddam Hussein out, and then the rest of the war could be canceled. But Saddam Hussein got away just a few minutes before, if you remember, and so the war was not canceled. So if you can do that, if you can, for example, what Trump did with Iran this time, go in there with with the bombs that penetrate the earth and go down and destroy what's several stories below, and there's no follow-up, right? There's no follow-up from the Iranian side, at least not immediately. So that was a case of escalating in order to de-escalate. It worked at least in the short term, and we'll have to see how far that lasts. But in the long term, of course, there's going to be consequences. But at least in the short term, it worked. So if President Trump tries something like that with Russia, a country that I think it may have more nuclear warheads than the United States. I can't remember. Both countries have a lot, but I think Russia may have at least. I think theirs are kept up, at least maintained. So there is a huge risk, a huge risk. Remembering what Father said this morning, that no matter how the Earth may move, the planet Earth may move. So yeah, I mean, Russia has enough nuclear weapons to actually to change the orbit of the Earth, possibly. But Father said, even if that happens, then north, south, east, and west will not change, and the direction of the Unification Church will not change. So, yeah, there may be more implied in Father's words this morning than we are willing to imagine right now. But 50 days. Okay, well, we'll see what happens in 50 days. All right, let's see here. The pardons. So it turns out that Biden personally signed the pardon of his son. All right. All right, well, that's a father-son thing. But as Marlowe here, the opinion editor or opinion author in Breitbart points out, wait a second. If he could sign one, why couldn't he sign the others? If he was capable of signing one, why wasn't he capable of signing the others? And so this sort of leads credence to the idea that he wasn't even aware that his name was being affixed to these other pardons and other documents in the waning days of his, and maybe even during the administration. Right? So he calls this a smoking gun bombshell. On Monday's Alex Marlow show, host and Breitbart editor-in-chief Alex Marlow talked about Joe Biden's AutoPen use. Marlow said he did personally sign the pardon of Hunter, so he was capable of signing, but wouldn't. This is way worse for Joe Biden if he had only signed Hunter than if he had signed a series or none of them, right? Okay, so we'll see how this develops, whether this turns into something there. You know, but if you recall, the person who was in charge of operating the AutoPen testified before Congress recently, and she said that she did not know whether Biden had actually approved the use of the AutoPen in each specific instance. She was just told to do it, and she did what she was told. And she doesn't even know who made the decision, or at least she claims not to know who made the decision in each particular case. So it looks like this situation may be getting exciting. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Kim Jong-un, let's go to Kim Jong-un's military. In a recent intelligence report says that his military has hugely improved and now is a much greater threat, according to some intelligence assessment that was shared with the Times, and we don't know which intelligence assessment this is. But anyway, let's look at it. It could be true. Kim Jong-un's military has hugely improved its nuclear and conventional warfighting abilities after 6 months of fighting against Ukraine. North Korea has used the conflict as a testing ground to refine its combat strategies, according to an intelligence assessment shared with the Times. And I'm guessing this is the Times in London. Let's just check this out. Yeah, it's the Times. Okay, so it's the one in London. Experts believe the country's army now poses a much greater threat to South Korea and U.S. troops stationed there, having honed the accuracy of its ballistic missiles, developed drone warfare capabilities, and accelerated modern arms production. North Korea's comprehensive military alliance with the Kremlin was secured by Kim Jong-un, offering unconditional support to Russia during a visit by Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, over the weekend. Lavrov was seen hugging Kim as he thanked him for sending troops to the Ukraine war. According to the assessment prepared by the HUR, Ukraine's military intelligence arm, I see, it's the Ukraine intelligence. Well, that sort of undercuts its credibility. Anyway, cooperation with Russia has offered North Korea broad opportunities to modernize its armed forces. The statement added that North Korea's involvement in the war has allowed it to gain real experience in modern warfare, developed nuclear missile capabilities, established production of advanced weapon systems, strengthen its naval forces, and enhance intelligence gathering capabilities. I don't understand. Oh, I see. Because they got technology from Russia in return for the troops. That's what they mean by developing nuclear missile capabilities, I guess. Okay. Okay. And here, this is Lavrov there with Kim Jong-un. Okay. Looks like they're next to a boat. Did he go to Pyongyang by boat? Surely not, no. He could have gone to the East Coast by boat, I suppose, from Vladivostok. Why are they standing next to a boat? Very interesting. Maybe that's just I guess, a naval ship or something. Okay. All right. It said the country's cooperation with Russia significantly increases the threat to the U.S. and its regional allies, South Korea and Japan. The report states it is highly likely that North Korea's readiness to use military force in its foreign policy will increase in the future. It is said this is down to the lack of a strong response from the U.S. You see, this. Here we go. This is the Ukrainian propaganda now. Lack of a strong response from the U.S. and its allies to the country sending troops to fight Ukraine. So now Ukraine is trying to get the U.S. to go to war with North Korea. See that? That's why this intelligence report coming from Ukraine. I thought it might be from the British, but no, it's from Ukraine. And the whole point of this intelligence report is to try and cause a war between the U.S. and North Korea. All right, so let's stop that, and instead let's go to the warning coming from Japan. Japan, I believe they published their annual defense white paper, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. Japan raised a strong caution against China's rapid acceleration of military activity in extensive areas from its southwestern coast to the Pacific, describing the moves as the biggest strategic challenge. China's growing joint operations with Russia also pose serious security concerns to Japan, along with increasing tensions around Taiwan and threats coming from North Korea. The Defense Ministry said in an annual military report submitted to the cabinet on Tuesday. And this sounds like their defense white paper. Yeah. The international society is in a new crisis era as it faces the biggest challenges since the end of World War II, the report said, citing significant changes to the global power balance while raising concerns about an escalation of the China-US rivalry. The security threats are concentrated in the Indo-Pacific, where Japan is located, and could get worse in the future, the report said. Japan has accelerated its military buildup on southwestern islands in recent years. In other words, the island, I think this refers to the islands south of Okinawa, down to near Taiwan. Southwestern islands. When Japan says southwestern islands, that's it's the Nansei Shoto, which is the string of islands extending south from Kagoshima Prefecture. And so maybe it's all, but basically I think they're referring to what's south of Okinawa, including Okinawa. Preparing to deploy long-distance cruise missiles as it worries about a conflict in Taiwan, which China claims as its territory to be annexed by force if necessary. Taiwan launched 10-day annual live-fire military exercises last week intended to guard against Chinese threats to invade. Japan tested a short-range surface-to-surface missile at home earlier this month. Chinese warships advance in the Pacific has steadily increased, with the frequency of their passage off southwestern Japan tripling in the past 3 years, including in waters between Taiwan and the neighboring Japanese island of Yonaguni, the 534-page report said. The report comes days after Japan demanded China stop flying its fighter jets abnormally close to a Japanese intelligence gathering aircraft, which it said was happening repeatedly and could cause a collision. Beijing in return accused Japan of flying near Chinese airspace for spying purposes. The two earlier close encounters in June occurred over the Pacific Ocean, where Japan spotted 2 Chinese aircraft carriers operating together for the first time. China's increasing dispatch of aircraft carriers in the Pacific underscores the country's attempt to advance its sea power in distant waters, the report said. It said China's frequent dispatch of bombers for long-distance flights in the Pacific by more sophisticated flight routes and fleet organization is seen as Beijing's attempt to show off its presence around Japan and to further advance its operational capability. The Defense Ministry noted 2 cases last year: a Chinese warplane's brief violation of Japanese airspace over waters off islands near Nagasaki, and an aircraft carrier's entry into a zone just outside of Japan's territorial waters, further southwest of the Nansei Island chain, in other words, the Southwest Island chain, which stretches from the southern coast of Kyushu to Taiwan. With President Donald Trump focusing on the strengthening of the U.S. economy and security, Japan and other U.S. allies face expectations to play a greater role for peace and stability in the region, the report said. North Korea poses an increasingly serious and imminent threat for Japan's security, the report said, noting the North Korea development of missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads into Japanese territory, and solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the US mainland. Russia maintains active military operations around Japan and violated the country's airspace in September, the report added, saying its increasing strategic cooperation with China has posed strong concern for Japan's security. Right. Remember, a little while back, we had the story by one analyst who said that it may be possible to redirect China's aggression away from Taiwan and toward Russia. And he gave a number of reasons why China would be wiser to invade Russia rather than Taiwan. For example, if it were to invade Taiwan, it would be isolated in the world. The world opinion would be against it because Taiwan is a democratic country and produces all of our semiconductors, or a lot of them anyway. And also Taiwan would probably have to, deal with a major intervention by the United States and potentially Japan and somewhat potentially South Korea. Whereas if China were to invade Russia instead, they could start getting back some of their old territory, and B, they could get their hands on some actual sort of resources, such as water. Okay, and we went through this in the article, but northern China. I'm looking for a file that I want to show you. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay. What do I have to do? Okay. Water and oil, gas, rare earth minerals, so forth, and stuff like that. So, if China's smart, they would go north. These are the territories that China lost to Russia during the 19th century. Here, let me read this for you. This was 1858. They signed a treaty where they forfeited this territory to Russia. And then in 1860, they forfeited this territory, including what is now the Russians call Vladivostok. And this is the North Korean border here. They were a small, short border with North Korea and Russia right here. So, if China could get back some of this territory, this would solve a lot of problems for them. And they wouldn't have to face U.S. intervention. The U.S. is not going to be intervening in a war between Russia and China. Just standing by and watching. It might, I suppose, intervene on the side of Russia, I suppose. But anyway, China would be wiser to do that. Does anybody have Putin's or Xi Jinping's phone number so we can call him up and tell him that this is the wiser choice? Yeah, maybe not, huh? Okay. All right, so we'll have to wait and see. But the whole world, of course, is sort of on pins and needles right now, waiting for China to invade Taiwan. But it would be great if we could somehow, through our prayers in Chongsong, redirect that aggression northward. That would be just fantastic. That would be fantastic if we could do that. Okay. All right, now let's see here. Now, President Trump is in a good mood this morning because the Supreme Court is allowing him now to reduce, not eliminate, I don't think, but reduce the education department. Okay. The Supreme Court on Monday said President Donald Trump may proceed with his plan to carry out mass layoffs at the Department of Education in the latest win for the White House at the conservative High Court. Yeah, so apparently on Friday, the area in front of the State Department building on C Street was, flooded with tears. 1,300 people lost their jobs. Is it okay for me to laugh? I think it is okay for me to chuckle on that. Yes, yes. I'm sure a lot of deep staters were included in that, and I'm sure a lot more are still working there. But anyway, and now it looks like I don't know where the education department is located. I never covered them, but now it looks like the sidewalks in front of the education department today, or maybe yesterday, or maybe today, also are going to be flooded with tears. In an unsigned order, the justices lifted for now a lower court ruling that had indefinitely paused Trump's plan. The Supreme Court's decision puts that ruling on hold while the legal challenge plays out. So the people, in other words, the people will go ahead and lose their jobs, but if the government loses its case, then they'll just get their jobs back. But we'll have to see about that. Within 2 hours, the Department of Education sent notices to employees indicating it is immediately resuming its plans to shrink the department. CNN has reviewed emails sent Monday to some employees who were initially fired in April before the judge stepped in, informing them of the Supreme Court decision and saying they will be let go on August 1st. Okay, so not today. The department appreciates your service and recognizes the difficulty of the moment. The notice states this RIF action is not a reflection upon your performance or conduct and is solely due to agency restructuring as described in previous correspondence. The Supreme Court decision was attached to the notice. In a scathing dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the court's senior liberal member, said her colleagues had made an indefensible decision to let Trump proceed with taking apart an agency that ordinarily can be dismantled only by Congress. Well, he's not eliminating it. And yes, I think probably the law says that if it's going to be dismantled, it has to be done by Congress. In other words, if it's going to be erased, if it's going to be closed, it has to be done by Congress because Congress created it. But Trump is only reducing it, right? The majority is either willfully blind to the implications of its ruling or naive, but either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave, Sotomayor wrote in the dissent, which was joined in full by the other two liberal justices. Trump ordered mass layoffs at the department earlier this year, cutting its workforce in half, but lower courts have blocked that effort, noting that the Education Department was created by Congress. The president praised the High Court's decision in a Truth Social post Monday. The United States Supreme Court has handed a major victory to parents and students across the country by declaring the Trump administration may proceed on returning the functions of the Department of Education back to the states. Trump said, thanking the Supreme Court for their decision. Now, with this great Supreme Court decision, our Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, may begin this very important process. Okay, and so forth and so on. Okay. All right. And when the Education Department was created in the 70s, when was the Education Department created? Okay. I guess others have also asked that question. 1980. Wow. Okay. Even later than I thought. So 1980 would be Carter administration. President Reagan came into office in 81. So January 81. So this would be during the Carter administration. Okay. So it was established after the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was split into the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, so maybe this is what I was thinking of, Health, Education, and Welfare. When was the... I didn't realize that education was part of that. Health, education, and welfare created. Okay. 53, health, education, and welfare created by Eisenhower in 53. Huh. Okay. Yeah, Eisenhower created education. So I didn't realize that education was in the federal bureaucracy so early. Okay. All right. But yeah, but originally, education in America was a affair for local, well, frankly, local parents, at least in rural areas. And parents would get together, they'd build themselves a schoolhouse, a one-room schoolhouse in rural areas, and then they would hire a teacher, right? And then the teacher would come in and teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then when kids got older, they would I guess go to other schools in big cities or stuff like that. But then, of course, the whole Prussian education system came in, and the whole idea of public education and how everybody has to be indoctrinated. Let me turn on the fan here. Everybody has to be indoctrinated in the state religion and taught to obey the government. That came in, I guess, in the 50s or so. So now President Trump is saying, yeah, we're going to return education to the states, which is certainly a good first step. And it's good also because it gets education down closer to the families where it belongs. You have these teachers who say, hey, I've got an education degree. What degree do the parents have? Do they have an education degree? No, they don't. So they have no right to make any decisions or determinations about the education of their children. That has to be done by professionals such as me. This is their logic. But the whole idea of education has to be that the parents are able to pass down their values to their children. And what's happening right now, of course, as we all know, is that it's the opposite. Teachers are actually challenging the parents' values, encouraging the children to challenge their parents' values, and if it's done in a way that encourages dialogue between the parents and children, that's fine. But no, it actually is done in a way that discourages dialogue between children and parents, and encourages the children just to obey and follow their teachers, and allow the teachers to pass down their value systems to their students, regardless of what the parents may want or what the parents may be trying to teach the children. So it's important that this is that this is taken out of the federal government and put down one step down, and already, of course, counties have their school boards and stuff like that, and so forth. But we've seen that the federal government has used the power of the purse to force certain things on schools across the country, such as mixed sex bathrooms, for example, and so forth, and trans students or boys claiming to be trans, allowing those alleged trans sex children to interact with girls in unhealthy ways. All right, so as I said, President Trump, I'm sure, is in a good mood this morning, and we'll see how that goes. But this morning, I guess in about 45 minutes, yeah, he better get his good mood, stuff right now, because in about 45 minutes from now, information is going to come out on the inflation for last month. And the general expectation is that inflation is going to take an uptick. Let's just check to see. Let's just check to see what the expectation is. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. Let's see right now. Core inflation rate month over month previously was 0.1%. In other words, not in June, but in May. And the forecast is that, or the consensus is that in June it was 3 times that much, 0.3%, and then forecast of 0.2. And core inflation rate year over year, May was 2.8, and consensus for June now is 3. And just that's the core, right? So leaving out food and energy, that kind of stuff. Inflation rate month over month, 0.1 for May, 0.3 for June. That's the previous and then the consensus. And then the year over year, 2.4 for May, 2.7 for June. That's the consensus right now. So we'll see what that is. So anyway, the consensus, in other words, what economists expect is that that inflation is going to take an uptick for June. And of course, all right, we always have to give this caveat, all right? It's all a lie, but not as much of a lie as China, okay? But it's all a lie. So, but your own inflation. I'm sure you know how your food and stuff is going up or not. Okay. All right, but anyway, those are the figures that people look at. So it does have political ramifications if inflation ticks up. Okay. All right. What was this? Taiwan's military police practice defending the capital of Taipei. Okay. All right, let's look at some headlines somewhere. Where shall we go? Oh, we haven't done Newsmax, have we? Okay. Let's look at Newsmax. Well, okay, well, let's look at Epoch Times. Okay, Epoch Times is easier to go through. Okay, what to know about the ICE operation at California cannabis farms? Now, this is where they rescued about 10 children or so, I guess. And it was the largest workplace raid so far. 14 minors, 14 children in operation at California marijuana farms. And let's see here. NVIDIA says Washington has given nod to sell H20, is that H20 AI chips to China? Okay. Yeah. And the U.S. imposes 17% tariff on fresh tomato imports from Mexico. And flash flooding hits eastern seaboard overnight. Where is that? That looks like New York. Is that New York? It looks like the New York subway. Behind U.S. exit from WHO, a battle over direction of global public health. Yes. Okay. But yeah, I mean, China's dominating that organization while U.S. is paying the largest share. So of course, get out. Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, this is about the man who was killed on January 13th of last year. That's where Corey chose to sit. Okay, honoring his life. Trump's potential secondary tariffs on Russia could clobber China and India. Yay! I'm all in favor of that. The two Asian nations among the largest importers of Russian oil will be mainly affected by what two U.S. senators call a real executive hammer. Well, we covered this yesterday. So as much as I like it, we don't need to do it again. EU prepares second list of U.S. goods worth $84 billion for possible tariffs. And let's see here. Right. That's about it. From what I see, let's go to Newsmax. Okay, Butler cover-up revealed to see the investigation. You can take a look at that. Fauci, right? Rand Paul is on a crusade against Fauci. He's not going to give up. Reissuing criminal referral of Fauci over Biden's auto pen use. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, on Monday said he would reissue the criminal referral to the Department of Justice for Dr. Anthony Fauci after his pardon was confirmed to be issued by a late-night auto pen. Paul has long accused Fauci of lying to Congress to cover up information about the origins of the coronavirus, among other things. All right. And education can start shutting down the agency. Well, shutting down is a bit much, I think. Cutting it down significantly, yes, but I don't think she's going to shut it down without Congress's approval. And can't get Congress's approval without 60 votes in the Senate. And I don't think that's going to happen right now. All right. And UK would fight for US. UK would fight for the US, EU unlikely. He's saying the EU would not fight for the US? I think that's what he's saying. President Donald Trump said he believed Britain would fight to defend the United States, but suggested he could not say the same for the European Union, a factor in his decision not to sign a trade deal with the bloc. Trump told the BBC in an interview published on Tuesday that he also still had doubts about support from NATO members even after they agreed to increase defense spending. One of the problems with NATO, as I said, we have to fight for them, but will they actually fight for us if we had a war? Right? And I'm not sure I can say it, but I will say this. I believe that the UK would fight with us. He said, I think that they would be with us. I'm not sure that a lot of the other countries would be. I don't know what kind of a situation he's postulating here. Any war directed at the United States is going to be fought with nuclear weapons, and therefore is going to be a very short war, one way or the other. Unless, Canada, we can take care of Canada, I'm sure, and Mexico too, at the same time. So I'm not quite sure what Trump is worried about. But anyways, I guess he's just taking a hypothetical situation. Okay. All right. U.S. exits tomato agreement with Mexico. All right. Okay. DOJ issues guidance on English language order. Let's take a look at this. What's this about? President Trump's executive order establishing English as America's official language is being implemented by the Justice Department. The Justice Department announced Monday it will lead a coordinated effort across federal agencies to minimize non-essential multilingual services, redirect resources toward English language education and assimilation, and ensure legal compliance with the executive order through targeted measures where necessary. English is the official language of the United States, Attorney General Pam Bondi in her department's release. The Department of Justice will lead the effort to codify the president's executive order and eliminate wasteful virtue signaling policies across government agencies to promote assimilation over division. So specifically, I suppose, where would that come into effect? As you all know, my wife is Korean, and when we were in the United States, I think she really appreciated that communications from the school, for example, were often provided to her in her native language, in Korean. I thought it was convenient, certainly. When I was a young boy in Japan, I would bring home these communications from school. Back then, you didn't have email or anything like that. Bring home a piece of paper, and then I would have to translate it for my mother. So that was the beginning of my translation career. When I was like, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, I would have to translate for her. Yes. So, and I think many immigrant families in the United States probably go through a similar situation when their native language is not available in the communications. But this is about the federal government, so it's not going to affect local school boards or school communications. So I'm just trying to figure out. I'm wondering where it would be affected. IRS, but the IRS has well, okay, maybe health and welfare services and stuff like that. Maybe welfare programs. I guess there's a lot of Spanish used there. Maybe that's where it would. Anyway, okay. So let's see here. All right, so here, Trump's executive order rescinded an executive order from President Bill Clinton in 2000 that directed agencies to enhance access to federal programs for people with limited English proficiency and required tailored guidance for recipients of federal funding. The Justice Department said this order led to a straining of federal resources and impeding the assimilation of new Americans. And I suppose that is true. I suppose that is true. And okay, well, let me give you my rant. I've got 4 minutes. My rant on translation. This is not about welfare. This is about Father's words. And translation is a crutch. It's a crutch. And I've told you my experience, and I've told it a few times. So I think many of you, if I tell it again, you're going to say, "Oh no, not that story again." But about my first love letter from my wife, which I had translated by people in the office, and how that strongly motivated me never to use translation again, because it was a very embarrassing experience. Love letter is perhaps not the best document to show to strangers, or not strangers, but show to third parties, shall we say, for translation. But that experience did, encourage me not to use the crutch of translation. And it was a difficult process. My wife was, we agreed, as from hearing the previous renditions of the story, we agreed beforehand that to write each other letters in our own language. I wrote her in English. She wrote to me in Korean. And it was an extremely frustrating experience. And sometimes I would literally be rolling around on the floor, just trying to figure out what she was saying. Because I know, she was saying something wonderful about how much she loved me, and that kind of stuff. But so that was tremendous motivation. And it's tragic, but understandable that people don't feel the same motivation with Father's words, right? It's tragic, but understandable. I don't think you're going to roll around on the floor in frustration because you can't understand Father's words in Korean, or at least not many of you. But I've decided really that not to do any more translation of Father's words. That's my own personal decision. Other people may want to do it and stuff like that, but I've decided that I'm not going to participate in any more translation projects, new translation projects. But my feeling is that enough has been translated into English. And the problem with translation, especially English, is that English speakers, I find, take it for granted that anything important in the world is going to get translated into English. And then they take it a step further many times, saying that if something is not translated into English, then it must not be worth translating. And they also seem to think that the English translation is as good as, or should be considered on the same level as, the original. I met, this is several years back, I went to the office of one of our brothers in New York, and we decided to have a little Hundok session. And he brought out the English version of the Chanseonggyeong and read a passage and started analyzing it. And I felt very uncomfortable that he was analyzing Father's words based on the English. And here's a guy he has a PhD. So he knows this. He has a PhD, something to do with religion or philosophy or something. So he knows about original texts, right? He knows about this. And yet he was treating the English Chanseonggyeong as if it were on the same level as the original text. And that I told him I was uncomfortable. I said, no, listen, you can't do that. You can't do that. But you cannot go into that kind of analysis of Father's words based on the English. So anyway, that's my rant. 4 minutes on translation. If I had more time, I would go on, but you're probably lucky. Okay. That's it for today. God bless God.